Charisma in 60 Minutes, the fast guide to instant likability, magnetic presence, and confident conversation. Backed by psychology, usable today. By Seraphine Vale. Introduction. In the winter of 1776, the docks of France were cold and smelled of salt and wet wood. A heavy fog hung over the water, making everything look gray and soft. A man stepped off a ship. He didn't look like a hero or a famous leader. He was 70 years old, wore plain brown clothes, and had no wig on his balding head. In the fancy world of the French court, this should have been a disaster. The people there wore silk and powdered their hair white. They valued high-status games and expensive fashion. This man was Benjamin Franklin. He was there on a mission to save the American Revolution. He needed money, guns, and ships from the French king. If he failed, his country would die. Most people in his shoes would have tried to blend in. They would have bought a silk coat and learned to bow perfectly. Franklin did the opposite. Coat and learned to bow perfectly. Franklin did the opposite. He leaned into his plain look. He wore a simple fur hat. He spoke slowly. He used silence as a tool. Within weeks, his face was on clocks and jewelry. He was the most popular man in Paris. He didn't have natural charisma that he was born with. He had a strategy. He proved that being likable isn't a lucky accident. It is a strategic choice. You might not be trying to save a new nation, but you know the feeling of being the outsider. You've stood at the edge of a circle at a party, holding a drink and waiting for a gap in the conversation that never comes. You've sat in a boardroom with a great idea in your head, only to watch a louder coworker say the same thing 10 minutes later and get all the praise. It is painful to be the invisible contributor. You are smart. You are kind. You have a lot to offer. But for some reason, the world seems to have its volume turned down on you. You might have told yourself that charisma is a genetic software update you just didn't receive. You think you are just not built for the spotlight. This book is here to change that. In the next 60 minutes, you are going to learn that charisma is a set of behaviors, not a personality trait. You don't have to become a loud, annoying people person. You are going to become a magnetic catalyst. This is a person who doesn't just walk into a room and hope people like them. They set the temperature of the room. They make others feel comfortable, seen, and heard. By the end of this guide, you won't just be noticed, you'll be remembered. The science is on your side. Researchers have found that we judge people in thin slices, tiny windows of time where we decide if someone is a friend or a foe, a leader or a follower. By changing these tiny behaviors, you change your entire life. Meet Marcus Thorne. Marcus is 34 and lives in Seattle. He is a senior software architect, which means he is the guy who makes sure the engine of his company's app never stops running. He is brilliant. He is also socially translucent. Right now, Marcus is standing at a tech mixer. The air is thick with the smell of expensive espresso and the hum of 100 voices. He is holding a glass of sparkling water so tightly his knuckles are white. He wants to talk to the woman from the big design firm, but his feet feel like they are made of lead. He is worried if he speaks, he will say something too technical and boring. He watches a colleague walk up to the same group and instantly start a conversation. Marcus feels a sting of envy. He finishes his water and leaves after only 15 minutes. He tells himself he is just not built for this. Marcus represents the person with a great heart and a sharp mind who is constantly overlooked. He has a cat named Pixel, a nice apartment, and a career that is stuck because he lacks presence. We are going to follow Marcus as he learns to flip the switch. The journey from invisible to magnetic happens in small, fast steps. Here is what we are going to cover. 3 seconds to impact. Why the first moment someone sees you matters more than anything you say. The power of silence. How to use the Benjamin Franklin method to become the most interesting person in the room by saying less. The charisma switch. Using your body language to change how people feel about you before you even open your mouth. Presence on command. How to give someone the gift of your full attention in a world full of distractions. The science of high stakes, how to walk into a boardroom or a first date with the same calm confidence. You don't need a new personality. You just need a better toolkit. Let's begin. Chapter 1. 3 seconds to impact. Old Leo was a man who could walk into a noisy kitchen and cause a sudden, respectful silence without saying a single word. He wasn't a tall man, and he didn't wear expensive clothes. He was a retired stage director who had spent 40 years watching how people moved. One rainy afternoon, he sat me down and pointed at the ticking clock on his wall. "You have 3 seconds," he said. "In the time it takes to draw one deep breath, the people in that room have already decided if you are a leader, a friend, or someone they can completely ignore." Leo taught me that most people spend their whole lives trying to fix the middle of a conversation. They worry about their jokes or their facts. But Leo knew the truth. The game is won or lost before you even open your mouth. He called it the impact window. He believed that charisma wasn't a magic spell, but a physical signal of safety and confidence. In late September of 1960, the entire United States learned exactly what Leo meant. It was the night of the first televised presidential debate. Richard Nixon was a man of great intellect. He had been vice president for 8 years. On paper, he was the clear winner. But when he arrived at the TV studio in Chicago, he was recovering from a nasty flu and a knee injury. He looked pale and sweaty. He famously refused to wear professional makeup, thinking it was beneath a serious politician. On the other side of the stage stood John F. Kennedy. He had spent the weekend relaxing in the sun. He looked tan, healthy, and calm. When the camera started rolling, 70 million people tuned in. Those who listened on the radio thought Nixon had won the debate on points. They heard his logic and his experience. But the people watching the screen saw something else entirely. They saw a man who looked uncomfortable and a man who looked like he was already in charge. The visual, first impression of Kennedy's health and calm overrode every word Nixon spoke. That night changed politics forever because it proved that how we show up matters more than what we say. This is where most of us get stuck. We walk into a room and our invisible spotlight is pointed straight at ourselves. We think, is my hair okay? Do I look nervous? What if I say something stupid? This is the opposite of charisma. Real presence happens when you take that spotlight and aim it at the other person. You make them the star of the impact window, the science of the flash. Our brains are still wired for the wilderness. When we meet someone new, our subconscious asks one question: is this person a threat or a friend? You can answer that question instantly using the eyebrow flash. Scientists have found that a split-second lift of the eyebrows is a universal human signal for "I am friendly" and "I see you." It's a micro-movement that opens the door of trust before a single word is traded. Marcus Thorne sat in his office in Seattle thinking about that impact window. Marcus was a brilliant software architect, but he often felt like he was made of glass. People seemed to look right through him. He was standing in the lobby, waiting for the elevator, when the CEO of his firm stepped in next to him. Usually, Marcus would suddenly find his shoes very interesting. His heart would race, and he would point his invisible spotlight inward, drowning in his own shyness. This time, he tried something different. As the CEO turned toward him, Marcus didn't look away. He gave a quick, subtle lift of his eyebrows. He used the frontal heart rule, which means he turned his entire torso to face her, not just his head. This signals to the other person that they have your full attention. "Good morning, Sarah," he said. He didn't rush the words. He used the smile pause approach. Instead of a nervous perma-grin, he looked at her first, waited a beat, and then let a warm smile spread across his face. The CEO actually stopped looking at her phone. She looked at him, really seeing him for the first time in months. "Morning, Marcus. How's that new project coming along?" she asked. For the first time, Marcus wasn't just a name on an email. He was a person with presence, the power of the pause. Charismatic people don't rush. When you rush your greeting, you signal to the room that you are lower status, that your time is less valuable than theirs. By slowing down the first 3 seconds, you set the thermostat of the interaction. You aren't reacting to the nervous energy of the room, you are bringing your own calm warmth into it. Think about the sticky eye technique. When you finish a sentence or a greeting, keep your eyes on the other person for just 1 extra second before looking away. It creates a sense of deep connection and shows you aren't afraid of the moment. It tells the other person that they are the most important thing in your world right then. Imagine what your life would look like if every door you walk through felt like an opportunity rather than a chore. Imagine walking into a party, a meeting, or a date and knowing that you don't have to perform. You just have to be present. When you master these first 3 seconds, you stop being a background character in your own life. You become the person that others remember long after the conversation is over. You have the power to change the energy of a room just by how you stand in it. The impact window is always open. All you have to do is step through it. Chapter 2: Why do we fear the silence? In 1727, Philadelphia was a town of muddy streets and big dreams. While the British Empire was busy expanding its reach across the globe, a 21-year-old printer named Benjamin Franklin was busy making a mess of his social life. He was brilliant, and he knew it. Every time he sat down with friends, he turned the conversation into a courtroom. If someone made a small mistake, Ben corrected them. If someone had an opinion, Ben had a better one. He was winning every argument, but he was losing all his friends. He started a club called the Junto where young men could gather to discuss big ideas. But his habit of being right was killing the spirit of the group. Ben noticed that when he won a debate, the other person didn't look happy or enlightened. They looked small. They looked annoyed. He realized that being the smartest person in the room was actually making him the most disliked. To save his reputation, he did something radical for a man who loved his own voice. He decided to stop talking so much. He made a rule for himself to never use words like certainly or undoubtedly. Instead, he used silence. He began to ask questions and then just wait. He realized that the person who speaks the most is often the one who learns the least. By giving up the need to be the loudest voice, he became the most influential man in the city. He wasn't just reacting to the room anymore, he was setting the temperature. Most of us treat silence like a hole that needs to be filled. When a conversation stops for even 2 seconds, we feel a surge of panic. We think, I'm being boring, or they don't like me. We scramble to find a joke, a fact, or a story to fill the gap. But charismatic people know a secret. Silence is not a void. It is a gift you give to the other person. Scientists at Harvard University found that talking about ourselves feels as good to the human brain as food or money. It releases a chemical called dopamine. When you are the one doing all the talking, you are hawking all the brain candy. When you use silence, you are handing that candy to the other person. You are aiming the invisible spotlight directly at them, making them feel like the most interesting person in the world. Marcus Thorne sat in a small office at his firm, his back straight against the mesh chair. Across from him, his manager, Sarah, was staring at a spreadsheet on a large monitor. She looked tired. Usually, this was the part of the meeting where Marcus would start talking about code updates just to stop the room from feeling so quiet. His heart usually hammered against his ribs during these gaps. The launch is going to be late, Sarah said, rubbing her temples. The team in London isn't responding, and the client is already asking for a demo. In the past, Marcus would have jumped in immediately. He would have offered 3 technical fixes and a timeline. He would have tried to solve the silence. This time, he didn't. He used the 2-second pause. He counted in his head 1, 2, and stayed perfectly still. He kept his eyes on Sarah, not his shoes. The silence stretched. It felt heavy, but Marcus didn't break. Because he didn't rush to fill the gap, Sarah kept going. She told him she was worried about her own performance review. She shared a concern about the team's morale that she had never mentioned before. Marcus used the echo technique, simply repeating her last 3 words. The team's morale? Marcus asked softly. Sarah nodded and opened up for another 5 minutes. By the end of the meeting, she sighed and looked at Marcus with a new kind of respect. She hadn't just given him a status report, she had given him her trust. Marcus realized that by saying less, he had actually done more. He had set the temperature of the room to calm instead of anxious. To master this kind of magnetic presence, you can use a simple framework called active silence. It has 3 parts. The 2-second pause. When someone finishes a sentence, don't speak right away. Wait 2 full seconds. This signals that you are actually thinking about what they said, which is a massive compliment. The echo, if you don't know what to say, repeat the last few words the other person spoke as a question. This encourages them to keep talking and giving themselves that dopamine hit. Listen with your face. Silence only works if you look engaged. Keep your torso aimed at them and use small nods. This is listening loudly. There is a rule used by high-level negotiators called the wait rule. It stands for, why am I talking? Before you speak, ask yourself if you are adding value or if you are just trying to kill the silence. Usually, the silence is doing more work than your words ever could. Find one person to talk to today, a coworker, a cashier, or a friend. When they finish a sentence, do not respond immediately. Count to 2 in your head while looking them in the eye. See if they continue talking on their own. You will be surprised at how much people will tell you when you simply give them the space to do it. Chapter 3: Mastering the Language of the Body. In 1955, the most famous woman in the world walked through the busiest train station in New York City, and not a single person looked her way. Marilyn Monroe stood in the middle of Grand Central Station, surrounded by thousands of commuters rushing to their trains. She wore a simple coat. Her hair was messy. She looked like just another tired person trying to get home. Her friend, a photographer named Eve Arnold, watched in shock. For several minutes they walked through the crowds. Marilyn was invisible. She was a ghost in a beige coat. But then, as they reached the stairs, Marilyn turned to Eve with a playful look in her eyes. She asked a simple question. "Do you want to see her?" In a split second, everything changed. Marilyn didn't change her clothes. She didn't put on lipstick. She simply changed the way she stood. She straightened her back. She lifted her chin. She let a warm glow spread across her face. Her walk went from a heavy trudge to a light, rhythmic bounce. The effect was like a bomb going off. Within seconds, the invisible woman was gone. People stopped in their tracks. A crowd began to swarm around her, shouting her name. She had turned on her charisma using nothing but her body, the V shape and the turtle. Most of us spend our days acting like turtles. When we feel nervous, tired, or shy, our bodies try to protect our soft parts. We hunch our shoulders forward, we cross our arms, we look down at our phones. This is called I-shape posture. To the human brain, this signals that you are either afraid or you want to be left alone. Marilyn Monroe knew that charisma requires the V shape. This means keeping your shoulders back and your chest open. From an evolutionary standpoint, this tells the room two things. First, it shows you aren't hiding a weapon. Second, it shows you aren't protecting a wound. It signals that you are safe and high status. Charisma isn't about being the biggest person in the room. It's about being the most open person in the room. When you occupy your full space, you stop being a background character in someone else's story. You become the person who sets the energy for everyone else. Marcus and the coffee shop desk. Marcus Thorne sat at his usual corner table at the Cloud9 co-working space in Seattle. He was a social turtle by habit. His laptop screen was his shield. He kept his elbows tucked tight to his ribs and his neck bent low. He thought he was just being productive, but he was actually broadcasting a do not disturb sign to the entire room. He remembered the story of Marilyn's switch. He decided to try a small experiment. He pushed his laptop back a few inches. He sat up straight, feeling the back of the chair against his spine. He uncrossed his legs and let his arms rest loosely on the table, palms facing up. He felt exposed, almost like he was standing on a stage. 5 minutes later, a woman who worked at the desk next to him, someone he had sat near for 6 months without a single word, looked over and smiled. "I love that sticker on your laptop," she said. "Is that from the old tech conference in Portland?" Marcus realized his posture hadn't just changed how he felt, it had changed the invisible spotlight. By unfurling his body, he had signaled that he was open to a connection. For the first time in months, the spotlight had a place to land, the language of trust. Your hands are the most important part of your body language toolkit. Long ago, humans needed to see each other's hands to know if a stranger was holding a rock or a knife. Today, we still feel a deep subconscious sense of unease when someone hides their hands in their pockets or under a table. Charismatic people keep their hands visible. They use open palm signaling. When you speak with your palms visible, people find you more trustworthy and honest. It is a simple physical hack that bypasses the logical brain and speaks directly to the gut feeling of the person across from you. Another powerful tool is the doorway trigger. Most of us walk through doors with our heads down, thinking about our next task. To master your presence, use every doorway as a reminder. Every time you cross a threshold, imagine there is a string pulling the top of your head toward the ceiling. Roll your shoulders back and put a slight, warm look in your eyes. By the time anyone in the room sees you, you have already turned it on. Body language is often seen as a way to trick others, but it is actually a way to talk to yourself. When you stand like a person who belongs in the room, your brain begins to believe it. The fear starts to fade, and the magnetic catalyst inside you begins to wake up. Your body is the house your presence lives in. If the windows are boarded up and the door is locked, no one can see the light inside. When you open the curtains and stand tall, you don't have to go looking for attention. The world will naturally turn toward the light. Chapter 4. Presence. The Art of Being Nowhere Else. In 1912, a man stood on a stage in Milwaukee with a fresh bullet wound in his chest. A metal glasses case and a thick bundle of papers in his pocket had slowed the lead, but it was still buried deep in his rib. Most people would have collapsed. Instead, Theodore Roosevelt looked out at the shocked crowd and spoke for 84 minutes. He didn't just survive, he commanded the room so completely that people forgot there was an assassin nearby. He was, in every sense of the word, present. In a quiet corner of a modern city, a woman sits at dinner with a friend. Her phone is face down on the table. She isn't bleeding, and no one is trying to kill her. Yet her mind is miles away, wondering about an email she saw 3 hours ago. Her friend can feel it. The conversation feels thin and cold. These two scenes seem like they belong in different worlds, but they share a single secret. Charisma isn't about how much you talk or how loud your voice is. It is about your ability to be nowhere else. When you are fully in the room, you become a magnet. When your mind is split, you become invisible. The problem of the fragmented mind. We often think charisma is a performance, like an actor on a stage. But the most magnetic people in history, like Roosevelt or Marilyn Monroe, knew it was actually a state of mind. Marilyn had a way of turning on her presence. She could walk through a crowded train station unnoticed until she decided to be Marilyn. She would take a deep breath, focus her mind on the people around her, and suddenly the air in the room would change. Psychologists call this the smartphone effect, but it existed long before phones. It happens whenever we give someone half attention. Even if your phone is face down, its presence on the table signals to the other person that they are only your second priority. It breaks the invisible spotlight. When you look at someone but think about your to-do list, your eyes lose their spark. Humans are built to detect this. We have a biological radar for faking it. If you aren't really there, people won't trust you, and they certainly won't find you charismatic. Marcus and the empty pocket. Marcus sat across from a woman named Sarah at a small Italian restaurant. This was his first real date in months, and the old Marcus would have been a nervous wreck. Usually, he would keep his phone on the table, checking it every time Sarah looked away to hide his own awkwardness. This time, he did something that felt like jumping off a cliff. He left his phone in the glove box of his car. At first, he felt a strange itch in his thigh where the phone usually sat. But as the appetizers arrived, something changed. Without the safety net of his screen, Marcus was forced to use the Roosevelt gaze. He didn't just hear Sarah's words, he watched her expressions. He noticed the way she lit up when she talked about her sister's new puppy. Because Marcus was the thermostat for the table, his calm focus began to rub off on her. Sarah stopped fidgeting with her napkin. The temperature of the conversation shifted from a polite interview to a warm, deep connection. By the time the check came, Sarah said something Marcus had never heard on a first date. It's so refreshing to talk to someone who actually listens. When the mind wanders, the troubleshooting guide. Even the most charismatic people get distracted. Your brain is designed to look for new things, which makes staying present a constant battle. If you find yourself drifting during a conversation, don't panic. You can use these tools to pull yourself back. The mental anchor, if you feel your mind floating away, focus on a physical sensation for 3 seconds. Feel your toes inside your shoes or the weight of your back against the chair. This reboots your brain into the physical world. The 10-second eye contact. Most people look away too quickly. Try to hold eye contact long enough to notice the exact color of the other person's eyes. This forces your brain to pay attention to the human in front of you. The internal glow. Borrow Marilyn Monroe's trick. Imagine a warm light in your chest that grows brighter when you listen to someone. It sounds simple, but this mental image changes your facial muscles and makes you look more engaged. The biggest mistake people make is trying to act charismatic while their mind is busy worrying about how they look. This creates a glitch in your body language. Your words say, "I'm listening," but your eyes say, "I'm bored." Presence is the fuel that makes every other social skill work. Without it, the best lines in the world will fall flat. With it, even a simple hello can carry the weight of 1,000 words. Charisma is not a gift of the gab, it is the gift of your undivided attention. Chapter 5, The Night the Wall Came Down. Imagine looking down from a high-flying plane over a cold, gray field in Belgium. Below, 2 long, jagged scars cut into the frozen earth. These are the trenches of the First World War. Inside them are thousands of men who have spent months trying to kill one another. For miles, there is nothing but mud. Barbed, the patterns of life here are predictable. A shot is fired, a shell explodes, and the cycle of hate repeats. But on a cold night in December 1914, the pattern broke. A tiny light appeared on one side of the dirt. Then, a song drifted across the dark ground. The men in those trenches were enemies. They spoke different languages, wore different uniforms, and were told to hate the men on the other side. Yet, as the sun went down on Christmas Eve, something strange happened. German soldiers began placing small trees with candles on the edges of their dirt walls. They started singing carols. Instead of firing their rifles, the British soldiers sang back. Slowly, men who had been trying to end each other's lives just hours before climbed out into the no man's land between the lines. They didn't have much, but they shared what they had. They swapped cigarettes. They showed each other wrinkled photos of their wives and children back home. They even played a game of soccer with a ball made of rags. For a few hours, the war stopped existing. They found a bridge made of common humanity. They realized that the enemy also had cold feet, missed his family, and liked a good joke. This is the extreme power of rapport. If men in a war zone can find common ground, you can find it with anyone in a coffee shop or a boardroom. The science of the bridge. Rapport is not a magic trick. It is a psychological bridge. Scientists call this the similarity attraction effect. We are built to like people who are like us. Deep in our past, different often meant dangerous. Same meant safe. Even today, our brains are constantly looking for tiny signals that say, I am like you. When you find a shared interest, you aren't just making small talk. You are telling the other person's brain that you are part of their tribe. The mistake most people make is staying on the surface. They talk about the weather or the news. These are what topics. They are boring and rarely build a real bridge. To create true rapport, you must move to why topics. If someone says they are from Chicago, don't just ask about the cold weather. Ask, what made you decide to move away from there? The answer to a why question reveals a person's values and feelings. That is where the real connection lives. Marcus and the salesperson. Marcus Thorne stood by the office coffee machine, feeling that familiar wall of silence. Across from him was Dave, a loud guy from the sales team. They had nothing in common. Dave liked sports and loud cars. Marcus liked coding and his cat Pixel. Usually, Marcus would just nod and walk away, but today he decided to try a new tool. Dave was complaining about his long commute. Instead of just nodding, Marcus asked a why question. That's a long drive, Dave. Why do you choose to live so far out? Is there something you love about that neighborhood? Dave's face changed. He stopped complaining and started talking about a huge garage he had where he restores old music gear. Marcus's ears perked up. He told Dave he spent his weekends playing with vintage synthesizers. Suddenly, the invisible spotlight wasn't on Marcus's nerves. It was on their shared love for old knobs and wires. The thermostat in the room shifted. It went from cold and awkward to warm and friendly. By asking one deeper question, Marcus found the hidden us, the vulnerability loop. Another tool for building this bridge is the vulnerability loop. This happens when you share a small, non-scary flaw. Maybe you admit you're nervous about a big meeting or that you're terrible at remembering where you parked. When you do this, you give the other person permission to be human, too. It's like a signal that says, the wall is down. You're safe here. There is also a trick called spontaneous trait transference. It sounds big, but it is simple. When you talk about other people, listeners give those traits to you. If you tell a story about how kind a teammate is, the person listening will subconsciously start to see you as kind. Charismatic people use their words to build others up. In doing so, they build their own magnetic presence. Finding the gold. Building rapport is about finding the hidden us. You are looking for the one thing you both care about. It might be a hobby, a shared frustration with the office printer, or a dream of traveling to Japan. Once you find that us, the conversation stops being a chore and starts being a connection. You are no longer just waiting for the other person to be interesting. You are actively digging for the gold. But rapport isn't just about finding things in common. Even if you have the same hobbies, a bridge can still fall down if it doesn't have the right support. There are specific pillars that keep a connection strong over time. If you miss even one of them, the magnetism vanishes, and you go back to being a stranger. Do you know the 5 things that make a person instantly trusted? Chapter 6: 5 Pillars of Magnetic Rapport. In the 1990s, a professor at the University